when camp comes around, I like to see which unit standing out, right? Who is ahead of the curve? And we heard a few of the defensive players come out and talk about year 2 with Dan Quinn being further along than last year. And yesterday, you actually kind of talked about the defense looking like, or last year, yesterday, you talked about the defense looking like it's ahead. What seems to be clicking out there right now for this defense, Kyle?
I think it's interesting. It's a confidence and it's a bit of a swagger with this defense that hasn't necessarily been there in the past, because at least up until this point during my tenure with the team, the offense has been the one with all the confidence and the swagger. And they've been the ones that have been able to puff out their chests and say, okay, we run this building. It's been Dak, it's been Zeke, it's been Amari, it's been Jason Witten at times, and then moving into Dalton Schultz. And, man, that offensive line has been beefed up, and they, of course, have run a lot of this facility. That's not the case anymore. I mean, Dan Quinn has got that defense playing at a level that overshadows what this offense is doing. And everybody saw it last year.
Yeah.
I mean, toward the back half of the season, the defense was the highlight reel of this ball club, and I think that's continued. And you also see it with the personalities on that side of the football as well, with DeMarcus Lawrence and Trayvon Diggs and Micah Parsons, of course. And then you go and draft a guy like Sam Williams, who, I mean, Sam Williams, if they would have had pads on, he may have had 4 or 5 sacks yesterday. I mean, by himself.
That's one of the guys I was going to ask you about, was about Sam Williams.
Yeah.
What was he looking like?
Yeah, he's been fantastic. I mean, his get off, there were a couple times he lined up off sides, which is something I think, I mean, that's an easy fix, but it's still something that you want to make sure that as a rookie he's able to understand, because you can't be giving up the 5 yards as easy as he would have yesterday, because I think it was twice he was flagged for it. But he's also trying to get that extra step, and in doing so, he was in the backfield quite a bit. And he's not the only one. I mean, Chauncey Golston's had a great offseason, and he's looking solid. He was playing all over the defensive line yesterday, and I know you and I have had a conversation about Chauncey in the past, but he continues to catch my eye. And then defensively, I mean, you look at some of these other defensive tackles that I'm excited for them to stay healthy. I mean, of course, knock on wood, you don't want anything to happen in the preseason, but right now, if they go into week 1 healthy, the combination of Osa Odigizua, of Neville Gallimore, of Tristan Hill, and then the veteran of Carlos Watkins, all these guys all together, I feel like are going to provide an impact in that run-stopping ability that they haven't necessarily had on that defense. That was the missing key last year as well. I mean, you had the sacks, you had the turnovers, you had the secondary. Where was the run-stopping?
Yep.
And I feel like that's here. I feel like they know it's coming with some of this youth on the defensive line, and, of course, with a guy like Leighton Vander Esch and Micah Parsons to back those guys up. I still think that they feel very confident going into this early part of the season that this defense is going to run the show again, and they're showing it early on in minicamp.
So we talked earlier here on the show about Todd Archer's tweet about Jabril Cox. Before I move on to the other side of the ball, have you been able to check him out working with Britt Brown? Does he seem like he's getting closer? Because I feel like he could be a vital part of this defense too, Kyle.
No, I agree. I think he's a necessary part of the defense, especially when it's Micah, it's Leighton Vander Esch, and then after that it's Luke Gifford and Story Jackson, Devin Harper. I mean, the linebacker room's very thin. So you need Jabril Cox to not only be healthy, but you need him to be a consistent part. But I completely agree with what Todd was talking about, saying, I mean, he looks close. He continues to run well. He's doing some change of direction stuff off to the side. And it's interesting because the guys that aren't practicing, you almost get just as much in these minicamp practices out of the guys that are practicing, just because you get a chance to look at them as well and say, okay, well, Micah Gallup's looking good, but he's coming along nicely. Still a long way away, but it's still something that you can look at and see tangibly he is continuing to get better. And then with Jabril Cox, I mean, we were looking over there yesterday and saying, oh, he looks like he could be close
Oh,
I mean, at least from this training staff in what they've done as a track record in the past, I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to keep him out just on the sole basis of wanting him to be completely healthy. But at the same time, I mean, there's probably going to be an emphasis to try and get him in there when Oxnard rolls around and have him at least early on in training camp get those reps, get that feel back, because he really didn't get a chance to finish his rookie season. He's got an opportunity here to really see some playing time and to up the snap count quite a bit.
I think we're going to need him, man. I think we're going to need a lot of these young guys. And usually there's a young guy or two that has a day at these camps, right? And yesterday, Sam Williams was one of them, Kyle. And the other one was Jalen Tolbert. It seemed like he handled the pressure of being the dude well yesterday, and apparently some special teams pressure in regards to return snaps. What was your overall take on Tolbert yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, he's been really impressive. And the more that you watch him play, the more you feel like he's going to fill a role. Now, there's no James Washington.
Yeah.
There's no Michael Gallup. And then yesterday, specifically, there was no CeeDee Lamb. So he, at least out of the wide receiver group, should be that top guy. And him and Simi Fehoko and a lot of these young wide receivers, they were all having a great opportunity to get some great playing time and get to see what it's like for getting thrown to by Dak Prescott and things of the sort that they wouldn't necessarily get on a normal practice day. And Jalen Tolbert looks like he's already on that same page with Dak Prescott, because getting that rhythm down, finding a consistency with QB1 is exceptionally important for a young wide receiver. And Tolbert has done that. At least in the early parts of this offseason, it looks like he is on the same page. And there were a couple times yesterday that Dak threw into Tolbert's break. Like, I mean, he hadn't even broken yet, and he had already thrown the football. Tolbert breaks into it, and then boom, catch, what would have been a big gain, and moving forward. It was really Tolbert and Simi Fehoko yesterday. Those were the only two guys that saw any kind of success against this defense that was really suffocating at times throughout the practice period. It was a lot of those two guys, which is good, because those are young guys that need to contribute in some shape, fashion, and form. But the fact that Tolbert continues to stand out above the rest is a good sign for when Gallup and Washington and, of course, CeeDee Lamb are all back in the fold sooner rather than later.
Hey, you brought up Simi Fehoko's name a few times, and, we've been hearing Simi throughout the weeks, really, whether it be good or a little bit of bad, but it seems like he put on some of that off-season peanut butter, from a mental standpoint and physical standpoint, as we like to say here. Do you see Dak's confidence growing in Simi?
Yeah, I think it's starting to rise a little bit, and he mentioned it yesterday. He kind of gave a generic answer on, he's a young wide receiver. We like what he's done this offseason, but there is a bit of an upgrade that you've seen from Simi, because last year when he was in rookie minicamp, I remember watching from the building at the Star and saying, he's not moving the way that you would want him to move as a first-year wide receiver. I mean, he looks a little slow. He's rounding his breaks, and he's not necessarily getting off the line of scrimmage with the emphasis that you would need. He's fixed all of that to a certain extent. Now, he's no Amari Cooper running routes yet. I mean, He's not a technician by any means, but he's finding a way to get open. He's creating separation. He's exploding out of his stance as a line of scrimmage, and then you get an opportunity to throw him the football as many times as Dak has had over the OTAs and now minicamp. It's going to make him better as a pass catcher. Now, yesterday he did have a drop in the end zone where it was the best route I've seen him run. I was watching him the entire time. He's going up against Anthony Brown. He absolutely cooked him at the line of scrimmage. I mean, AB got tangled up. He got turned around. I don't know if he was expecting Fehoko to do something not as sharp as he did, or it just kind of underestimated him at some point throughout the break. But Anthony Brown was absolutely turned around. And then by the time that Fehoko had turned and was pretty much wide open, he had at least 2 or 3 steps on AB in the end zone. He just dropped the pass. I mean, it was a little bit high, but it hit right off of both of his hands and then it went through the back of the end zone. So it's almost like making a great move in basketball. You dribble through somebody's legs or you cross somebody up. You got to finish the layup. Like you got to finish. You got to catch the football. That's what happened yesterday with Fehoko, and so he's not there yet, at least from what we're seeing. But he is taking steps, and I think that's a positive thing for this offense moving into it.
You brought up AB, and you said the defense was kind of clamping on a lot of these dudes. It's kind of hard to get a read, I think, on the corners because they're not playing against the top guys. But if you could, any type of read, how have they been performing or looked to you?
Well, it's also tough because they're not really hitting anybody either, just because there's no pads on as well. It's the same thing with offensive and defensive lines. I mean, everything you see, you got to take with a bit of a grain of salt because the pads aren't on yet. And of course, when we get to Oxnard, first couple practices, theirs won't have pads either, and then they'll put on the pads, and that's when we really get a look at what these guys are looking like. But as far as the corner in the secondary goes, I really do like what I've seen. That was probably the only time throughout this entire offseason I've seen AB just straight up, I mean, cooked. He hasn't been beat. He's been in the hip pocket, a lot of these guys. He made a couple nice plays yesterday. I think there were 2 or 3 pass breakups that I saw from AB. Jordan Lewis looks like he's destined to get back in the mix and try and go again for another career year, kind of like what he had yesterday. Not yesterday, but last year with 3 picks and trying to continue that now into the 2022 season. The only thing that I think would be a bit disappointing at this point is just the lack of practice that Kelvin Joseph has been able to attend. He wasn't out there yesterday. It's one of those things that you just expect him to take a step at some point. I mean, he's a second-round player. Yep. And a lot of pressure got taken off of him last year because of the explosion of the first-round pick in Micah Parsons. But, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on Kelvin Joseph this year to come out and to at least show a certain amount of improvement. And to this point, it's hard to tell, one, like you said, at all with cornerbacks. But with him, he really hadn't been on the field a whole lot, so you haven't necessarily seen exactly what he could do. But I know this team expects him to take a step forward. He expects to take a step forward. They've just got to find a way to get him into that mix. And right now, whether it's an injury or maybe just something going on with him, then it's not necessarily panned out the way that you would have anticipated as a Cowboys fan.
I think camp is going to be very important for Kelvin Joseph, but looks like Isaac Taylor Stewart is taking advantage of his opportunities, though.
Yeah, a couple young safeties, honestly, are taking advantage of those opportunities, or secondary players, I should say, because Isaac Taylor Stewart had a pick six yesterday. He exploded and cut off a pass and then took it all the way to the house. He's been great, I think, from an undrafted free agent standpoint, showing, hey, I can do this too. I can stay in the mix and I can be in a rotation, and I really like his traits. He's a little bit smaller than some of the guys that you would anticipate being out there, but he's got some burners, and we saw it yesterday when he picked off that pass. He turned on the afterjets and made it into the end zone. It would have easily been a pick six, and that was on the first play of the drive as well too. I mean, he didn't waste any time being out there and running with that group of players. He got out there and made the pick. Another player that's really been impressive in the secondary is Tyler Coyle in his second year. I really like what I've seen from him. I like the ability that he's shown to be in the right place at the right time, either as a pass breakup or even in stopping the run. He comes down and he's been able to lay a good, I can't say hit, but a couple hands on players at the time. When he's able to drop down, he's in the right place, he's learning this defense, and he's really making good reads at the moment, and he's making good breaks. I got to watch yesterday's practice with Barry Church, and we were kind of talking about some of these young safeties, and he pointed out Coyle as well and was like, man, I really like what he's doing too. So, I mean, when game respects game like that,
yeah,
you can take some stock into it as well. So Isaac Taylor Stewart and absolutely Tyler Coyle, both of which were shining yesterday. And I think there's a lot of depth in those positions where there hasn't really been any depth in the past.
That is very interesting because that cornerback room to me is deeper with bodies than I think people realize. So a guy like if Isaac Taylor Stewart can get on this team, I think he'll earn that, and that's a great thing. For Coyle, the safety room is not as deep behind the top three, but if he makes it again, I think he'll earn it because he's going up against guys that were drafted in front of him, and potentially some undrafted guys as well. So good to hear from Coyle and Isaac Taylor Stewart doing well.
Yeah, it's interesting with Tyler Coyle, and you mentioned kind of the safety room itself, but you look at those top three guys with Jaren Kearse, and then you got Malik Hooker, and then Donovan Wilson. I think they're expecting a second-year jump from Israel Mukuamu as well. One of the big things with him that last year we talked about extensively was his lack of willingness to step up and lay a hit. I mean, as a corner, you don't have to do that a whole lot. Sure, you have to hit some guys, but for the most part, you want to stay away from the physicality. So when he moved from corner to safety last year, I think there was a flip of the switch that just never happened. And he would step up, he would be in the right spot, but then he'd be on his back foot and he'd be on his heels to the point where he wouldn't necessarily be able to make the play. And so I think this year he's found a bit of a rhythm. He's continued to show why the traits were good enough for him to be drafted as highly as he did, and I think he's going to take a second-year jump there as well. So along with Tyler Coyle, I agree. I think Israel Mukuamu is going to help, and even Marquise Bell as an undrafted free agent this year, I think are guys that are going to fill out that safety room very nicely.
Man, you just get me excited for camp. Because I know once they get the pads on, and the depth battles are probably going to be the most fun things about camp because we're pretty secure on who the guys are going to be above them. But those depth battles are going to be fierce, man, fierce.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Kyle, in closing here, buddy, the big talking point coming out of yesterday had nothing to do with really practice. I think it was Mike McCarthy in his press conference talking about Dak Prescott being a little bit more mobile and being more lean, and he even joked to the reporter that he didn't want to give a game plan things away, right? But are they pushing him more physically in regards to his mobility, and are you seeing a more jacked Dak, if I say?
Yeah, I think they want that element of the offense back into the fold because I think last year you looked at the ability of Dak to roll out, it was there, but for the extended run, or at least to have him as a part of the read option or as an option as a pure runner, it was either a lack of willingness to let him run, or maybe he just didn't necessarily have the same type of mobility that he had prior to the injury as well. So there were a couple factors that could have gone into it. However, I think Kellen probably looked at the tape last year and said, man, if we really had Dak Prescott as a guy who could run, this would help us open up our offense even more than what it did last year, and it probably could have helped them down the stretch. So I think this is an element of the game that they want him to be a part of again. But he even said it yesterday, and he joked in his open locker room interview where he said, I might be leaner, but that doesn't mean I'm faster. He said, I'm slim and I'm lean. It doesn't mean I'm faster though. Like let's not get carried away here. But there's a lot of excitement I think around him being. He also said it too, flexible, yep. more flexible, and hopefully that's a case of durability as well. And if there's not as much of a concern with durability, then you go back to 2016 through 2019 Dak Prescott, where you can use him in a number of different ways without the fear of him truly getting injured. And then I think the offense could really benefit from that.
I think that's hilarious that he said that. I didn't catch that part yet in the interview because he never was a speedster. and he's not hiding it. He was more of a tank than he was a cheetah.
Yeah. Yeah, he even said that about his college days. He's like, I was a little chubby in college. I mean, I was thick in college, so it was a little bit different from a build standpoint.
That's hilarious, man. Hey, appreciate you coming through, Kyle. I love doing this, man. Definitely want to have you on here again, maybe towards the end of this here minicamp, or once we get camp started back up, actual training camp, man.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Anytime. Appreciate you having me on as always.
Yes, indeed, brother. Enjoy the rest of your day, man.
Thanks, man. You too.
That was Kyle Youmans, Dallas Cowboys staffer, TV host, writer, everything for the Dallas Cowboys, joining us today.